Last year, I harvested fresh food from my garden in every single month of the year, all 12 months, and I only planted new seeds twice. That is not an exaggeration. From a garden that measures roughly 20 feet by 30 feet, I picked asparagus in April, lettuce that seeded itself in May, herbs and greens all summer long, kale and collards well into December, and overwintered garlic and leeks in January and February, and I did it without a greenhouse, without grow lights, and without any of the frantic spring planting that used to consume my weekends for a solid month. The conventional approach to home gardening is to start completely fresh every single year. You buy flats of transplants, you till your beds, you plant everything in rows, and by the time October rolls around, your garden is bare dirt waiting for the next spring. I did exactly that for over 20 years, and every single spring I was exhausted before the first tomato even ripened. Then my Amish neighbor Daniel showed me something that completely reset how I think about a garden layout. He walked me through his family's garden one November afternoon, and I could not believe what I was looking at. There were greens growing under low covers. There were leeks standing tall. His perennial beds were already storing energy underground for the next spring, and his wife had just harvested fresh sage and thyme that morning for their dinner. His garden never stopped. It never went to sleep the way mine did. What Daniel explained to me was a layout system, not a planting calendar, but a physical arrangement of 4 distinct zones that work together so the garden essentially runs itself after the first year of establishment. And once I understood the logic behind it, I redesigned my entire backyard around these principles. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly how to build this 4-zone layout from scratch. I will give you the exact bed dimensions, the specific varieties that make it work, and the planting approach for each zone. And stay with me to the end because I will share a first-year technique Daniel taught me that lets you harvest food from your perennial beds the very same season you plant them, even though most gardening guides say that is not possible. Let us start from the ground up. Now, I want to be straight with you. For most of my gardening life, I treated my garden like a blank canvas every March. I would go out, turn over the soil, buy $60 worth of transplants, spend 2 full weekends planting, and then do it all over again the next year. I thought that was just what gardening was. The annual cycle, the yearly reset. If you have been doing the same thing, you are not alone. I was right there with you for more than 2 decades, and I do not say that to make anyone feel bad about their approach. Annual gardens can produce wonderful food, but what I did not realize was how much yield I was leaving on the table by ignoring plants that come back on their own, plants that reseed themselves, and crops that actually get more productive the longer they stay in the ground. The turning point for me was walking through Daniel's garden that 3rd year of knowing him. I had seen his layout before, but never in November. When I saw food still growing while my own beds were bare mud, something clicked. I went home and started researching perennial vegetables, self-seeding crops, and overwintering techniques. What I found matched exactly what Daniel had been doing for decades, and the agricultural research backed it up completely. That winter, I sat down with graph paper and redesigned my entire garden. And that first full year of the new layout, my spring workload dropped by about 60%, while my total harvest actually went up. Here is the core idea that changed everything for me, and it is not complicated. Most of the vegetables we grow as annuals actually do not need to be replanted every year. Some are true perennials that live for a decade or longer. Others are self-sowing annuals that drop their own seeds and come back without any help from us. In a third group, the overwintering crops can survive cold months in the ground and give you harvest when everything else is dormant. Research from the University of Wisconsin Extension and from land-grant universities across the Midwest confirms what Amish gardeners have practiced for generations. A perennial vegetable like asparagus reaches peak production around year 4 and continues producing for 15 to 20 years from a single planting. Self-seeding lettuce varieties like flashy troutback and red deer tongue will reseed in place if you simply let a few plants bolt and drop their seed heads. And cold, hardy brassicas like winterbourne kale can survive temperatures down to about 10 degrees Fahrenheit with basic row cover protection. The Amish approach takes advantage of all 3 groups and arranges them in a specific layout so that at any point in the year, at least 2 of the 4 zones are actively producing food. It is not about fighting nature. It is about working with it. You are designing a garden that follows the natural life cycle of these plants instead of working against it by ripping everything out and starting over each spring. Once you understand this, the layout makes perfect sense. So let me show you exactly how to set it up. The first thing you need to do is map your space and understand plan where each zone goes. Daniel's layout works in a space as small as 15 feet by 20 feet, though 20 by 30 feet is more comfortable for a family of 2 to 4. You need at least 6 hours of direct sun across the whole area, and ideally 8. Here is how the 4 zones are arranged. Think of your garden as a rectangle. Zone 1, the perennial backbone, runs along the north side or the back of your garden so the tall plants do not shade everything else. Zone 2, the self-seeding corridor, sits directly in front of Zone 1. Zone 3, the succession and overwintering beds, occupies the center and the largest section. And Zone 4, the living edge, wraps around the east, west, and south perimeters. Each zone has a specific width. Zone 1 should be 4 feet deep. Zone 2 is 3 feet deep. Zone 3 gets the remaining center space, usually 8 to 12 feet, depending on your total garden size, and I recommend dividing it into at least 3 beds that are each 3 to 4 feet wide with 18-inch walkways between them. Zone 4 is a 2 to 3 foot border around the outside edges. Now grab a piece of graph paper or even just sketch it out on the back of an envelope. Mark north. Draw your rectangle. Label the 4 zones. This takes 10 minutes and it saves you from the single biggest mistake I see people make, which is putting perennials in the wrong spot and having to dig them up 2 years later. Now let me walk you through exactly what goes into Zone 1, the perennial backbone. This is the foundation of the whole system and the reason you stop replanting every spring. Zone 1 runs along the north side of your garden and is 4 feet deep by whatever width your garden allows. In my 20-foot wide garden, that gives me an 80 square foot perennial bed. Here is exactly what I planted in mine, following Daniel's recommendation. On the far left, I put in a row of 6 asparagus crowns, variety Jersey Night, spaced 18 inches apart. Asparagus needs about 3 feet of width, so that takes up one side. Next to the asparagus, I planted 2 rhubarb crowns, variety Valentine, spaced 3 feet apart. These 2 plants alone give me harvest from mid-April through June without me touching a single seed packet. In the remaining space, I planted a block of Jerusalem artichokes, also called sunchokes, variety Stampede, because it matures earlier than most. I put in 8 tubers, spaced 12 inches apart in 2 rows. These grow tall, sometimes 8 to 10 feet, which is exactly why they go on the north side, where they will not cast shade over your other zones. They produce tubers you can dig from October all the way through early spring, as long as the ground is not frozen solid. I also tucked in perennial herbs along the front edge of Zone 1, 6 plants total. 2 sage, 2 oregano, 1 rosemary if you are in USDA zones 7 through 10, and 1 lovage. If you are in zones 3 through 6, skip the rosemary and add a second lovage or a clump of chives instead, since rosemary will not overwinter reliably where temperatures regularly drop below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The conventional approach is to buy fresh herbs as annuals every spring. What I have found works much better is putting them in a permanent spot where they come back larger and more productive every single year. My oregano patch is in its 4th year now, and it produces more than my family and my neighbors can use. Here is the key with Zone 1. You plant it once and then you leave it alone. No tilling, no turning the soil, no replanting. You mulch it with 3 to 4 inches of straw every fall, and you let these plants do what they were designed to do. After the first year of establishment, this zone produces food from April through November with absolutely no replanting required. Now that your perennial backbone is in place, here is where things get really interesting. Now, what I'm showing you today is just one piece of a much bigger picture. The Amish don't do anything in isolation. Every technique connects to a whole system, and that system is what makes the difference between a garden that struggles and a garden that practically takes care of itself. I spent years learning how it all fits together, and I've put everything into a step-by-step guide called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. It's got the complete 5 defense layers, the companion planting charts, the 4-bed crop rotation, all of it laid out day by day, so you're never guessing what to do next. If you want to go deeper than what we can cover in one video, there are 2 easy ways to get it. You can click the link right down there in the description below this video, or if you're watching this on your TV or your computer, just grab your phone, open up the camera, and point it at the QR code on screen right now. It'll take you straight to the guide. No searching, no typing anything in. All right, let's keep going. Zone 2 is what I call the self-seeding corridor. corridor, and this is the part of the layout that surprised me the most when I first saw it working in Daniel's garden. This 3-foot deep strip sits directly in front of Zone 1, and its entire purpose is to grow crops that replant themselves season after season. Here is what I mean. Certain annual vegetables, if you let just a few plants go to seed instead of pulling them all out, will drop seeds that germinate on their own the following season without any intervention from you. Daniel had been doing this with lettuce, arugula, dill, and cilantro for as long as he could remember. His grandmother did it before him. Here is exactly how to set it up. In your 3-foot corridor, direct sow these 4 crops in early spring, about 4 to 5 weeks before your last frost date. For lettuce, I use flashy troutback and red deer tongue because both are vigorous self-seeders. Scatter the seeds thinly across about 1/3 of the corridor and barely cover them, just 1/8 of an inch of fine soil. For arugula, use standard common arugula, not the wild variety, for your first year, and sow it the same way in another 1/3. In the remaining 1/3, sow dill, variety bouquet, and cilantro, variety santo, mixed together. Now here's the important part, and this is where most people go wrong. When your lettuce starts to bolt in June or July and sends up the tall flower stalk, do not pull it. I know every instinct tells you to yank it out, but let 3 or 4 plants per variety go completely to seed. Let the seed heads dry right on the plant. They will shatter and drop seeds into the soil on their own. Those seeds will germinate in late summer or the following spring, depending on your climate. In my Zone 6 garden, I get a volunteer lettuce flush in September that I never planted. In zones 8 through 10, you may get volunteers as early as late August. By year 2, this corridor essentially plants itself. I have not sown lettuce seed intentionally in 3 years now, and I have more lettuce than my family can eat. The same principle applies to the arugula, the dill, and the cilantro. Let a few plants bolt, let them drop seed, and they come back. Daniel's dill corridor has been self-seeding for over 20 years. Every June, it simply appears. The conventional approach is to pull out anything that bolts and start fresh. What I have found works dramatically better is selecting bolt-resistant varieties for your eating harvest and then letting a few dedicated plants complete their full life cycle right where they stand. Now let us move into the heart of the garden, Zone 3. Zone 3 is your succession and overwintering section. This is the largest zone, and it is the only part of the layout where you do some seasonal planting, but far less than what you are probably used to. This is where you put crops that are not truly perennial and do not reliably self-seed, but that can be timed and chosen so the beds are never sitting empty. I divide Zone 3 into 3 beds, each 4 feet wide and 10 feet long, with 18-inch paths between them. Here is how I rotate through them across the year. Bed 1 gets garlic planted in mid-October, about 6 to 8 weeks before your ground freeze. I plant roughly 60 cloves of hardneck garlic, variety music, spaced 6 inches apart in rows 8 inches apart. That gives me 60 full heads of garlic harvested the following July. After the garlic comes out in July, I immediately transplant a fall crop of winter boar kale using seedlings I started indoors about 4 weeks earlier. That kale grows through fall, and with a simple row cover, a piece of medium weight fabric draped over wire hoops about 18 inches high, it survives into January and sometimes February in zones 5 through 7. In zones 8 through 10, it will produce right through winter. Bed 2 is my main summer bed. This is where I grow tomatoes, peppers, and beans the same way anyone else would. I plant these in May after my last frost. The difference is that when those summer crops finish in September, I do not leave the bed empty. I direct sow a cover crop of winter rye and crimson clover at a rate of about 2 pounds of rye and half a pound of clover per 100 square feet. That cover crop protects the soil all winter long, fixes nitrogen, and gets chopped and turned in about 4 weeks before spring planting the following year. Bed 3 is dedicated to what Daniel calls the bridge crops. These are cool season vegetables that fill the gap in early spring and late fall when most gardens produce nothing at all. I sow spinach, variety Bloomsdale longstanding, and radishes, variety Cherry Bell, in late February or early March, about 6 to 8 weeks before last frost, using a simple low tunnel for protection in zones 3 through 6. These are harvested by mid-May, and then I follow with the summer planting of bush beans. After the beans finish in late August, I sow turnips and winter radishes for fall and early winter harvest. The result of this 3-bed rotation is that Zone 3 has food growing in it during every single month of the year. There is never a point where all 3 beds sit empty. The garlic overwinters, the kale overwinters, the cover crop overwinters, and the bridge crops fill the early spring and late fall gaps. Now for The final zone, zone 4, is the living edge that wraps around your garden's east, west, and south perimeters. This is a 2 to 3 foot border planted with perennial berry bushes and permanent alliums that serve double duty. They produce food and they help create a natural boundary that protects the inner zones. On the south-facing edge, I planted 3 blueberry bushes. Variety Patriot for zones 3 through 7, or Sunshine Blue for zones 8 through 10, spaced 4 feet apart. On the east and west sides, I planted perennial bunching onions. Variety Evergreen Hardy White, every 8 inches along the length. These come back every year from their root base, and I just snip greens whenever I need them. I also tucked in sorrel, variety largely French, every 2 feet along the east side. Sorrel is one of the most underappreciated perennial vegetables out there. It comes up in early March before almost anything else in the garden, and it produces tangy leaves right through November. This living edge gives you berries from June through August, onion greens from March through November, and sorrel for even longer. And none of it ever needs replanting. Now, before I wrap up, I want to go through a few patterns I see that can really hold this system back, and I have made every single one of these mistakes myself. The first pattern is putting perennials in the wrong location. I did this my very first year. I planted Jerusalem artichokes in the center of my garden, and by August they were 8 feet tall and shading everything behind them. If your perennials are not on the north side, they will cast shadows across your other zones and stunt your summer crops. Take the time to orient your layout correctly from the start. Moving established asparagus or sunchokes after 2 years is a genuinely miserable job. Trust me on that one. The second pattern is pulling up volunteer seedlings. Once your self-seeding corridor gets established, you are going to see little sprouts pop up that look like weeds. That tiny seedling with the reddish tinged leaves might just be your flashy trout back lettuce coming back on its own. Before you pull anything from zone 2, let it grow to at least 2 inches tall so you can properly identify it. I accidentally yanked out an entire flush of volunteer arugula my second year because I was convinced it was a weed. That was a hard lesson I only needed to learn once. The third pattern is leaving beds bare over winter. This is probably the most common one I see. When your summer crop's finished, the temptation is to clean everything out and call it a season until spring. But bare soil over winter means erosion, nutrient loss, and compaction from rain and freeze-thaw cycles. Every bed in zone 3 should have something growing in it or covering it 12 months a year, whether that is a food crop, a cover crop, or at minimum, a thick layer of straw mulch. The fourth pattern is trying to build all 4 zones at once in year 1. I would strongly recommend starting with zone 1 and zone 4 in your first fall because those perennials need time to establish their root systems. Add zone 2 the following spring and build out zone 3 by that summer. Trying to do everything simultaneously leads to burnout, and I have seen too many good gardeners quit because they took on more than they could manage at once. Give it 1 full year to get the bones in place. In the second year, you will see the whole system come to life. Now, I promised you a technique Daniel showed me that lets you harvest food from your perennial beds in the very first season, and here it is. He calls it nurse cropping, though the University Extension folks have their own names for it. When you plant your asparagus crowns and rhubarb and sunchoke tubers in zone 1 during that first spring, there is a lot of bare soil between those newly planted perennials. Most gardening guides will tell you to just mulch the empty space and wait patiently. Daniel does something different. He directs house quick growing radishes and leaf lettuce in all that open space between the perennial crowns. Here is exactly how. After planting your asparagus crowns at their proper depth of 6 to 8 inches, scatter cherry bell radish seeds in the gaps between crowns about 1 inch apart and lightly cover with a 1/4 inch of fine soil. Do the same with loose leaf lettuce seed in the spaces between your rhubarb crowns and around your sunchoke tubers. The radishes are ready to pull in 25 to 30 days. The lettuce is ready to start cutting in about 35 to 40 days. You harvest both crops well before the perennials need that space for their own growth. And here's the part that surprised me. The radishes and lettuce actually help the perennials establish by shading the soil and keeping it cool and consistently moist during that critical first growing period. By the time your perennials start putting on serious top growth in midsummer, the nurse crops are already harvested and gone. Daniel has been doing this every time he establishes a new perennial bed for over 40 years. It works beautifully, and it means you never have a wasted season, not not even in year one. Now, what I've shared with you today is a real piece of the puzzle, but it's still just one piece. If you're tired of fighting the same battles every season, if you want a garden that actually works with you instead of against you, then I'd really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It's called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, and it's everything I've learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It's got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold, and it includes a companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. Now, there are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you'll see it. The second way, if you're watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you're going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it'll bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it's the best investment you can make in your garden this year. You know, when Daniel first walked me through his garden that November afternoon, the thing that struck me most was not any single plant or any one technique. It was the calm. His garden was not a project he was anxious about. It was just quietly producing food the way it had been doing for years. That is what this layout can give you once you commit to it and let the system settle in for a full season. I would love to hear what you think. Drop a comment and let me know which zone you plan to start with this year. Good luck out there, and keep working with nature, not against it.